I'm Brandon Collins. I'm the Corporate Executive Chef for Unilever Food Solutions, and I have the pleasure of introducing two amazing culinarians. They are way more talented than I will ever be, so I'm glad that you guys are going to watch them cook and you don't have to watch me cook. Just real quick, if you have any questions, just feel free to kind of shout them out. We'll get a microphone to you so that way you can ask as we're going through the process. It's so much easier to interact with them rather than waiting until the end, right? So to the left, I have the amazing chef Brigid Ransome-Washington. She is the author of 2 Caribbean-inspired cookbooks and an all-around amazingly talented chef. Her essays have been in Bon Appetit, Epicurious, Food and Wine, Parents, Real Simple. That is a list.
I'm gonna leave now.
So I mean, I could keep doing this for the next 3.5 hours, but her bio is also in the app, so feel free to read it as well. Absolutely amazing chef. I'm very, very honored to be here with you. And then on the right we have Chef Paul Smith. Chef Paul Smith is somebody who I have known for 24 years now. And funny enough, we hadn't seen each other for 22 years up until Monday, which is really, really awesome. So Chef Paul Smith is the chef at 1010 Bridge in Charleston, West Virginia. He also has like 17 other ventures that he's working on currently. And he was just recently nominated and became a finalist for the James Beard Award for his region. And again, an absolute pleasure to be here with you as well, Chef. So I'm looking forward to what you have to talk about with the Appalachian Foodways and kind of understanding and deepening that culture and how we can kind of bring that to life on our menus around the country. So feel free, take it away, chefs.
Excellent. Good morning, everybody. So I will be making a Trinidadian beef pelau, and you're probably thinking, what does Trinidad Island in the Caribbean have to do with Appalachian Foodways? And the link for me is the legible line is drawn with sugar. And in the Caribbean, it's sugarcane. In Appalachian, most of Appalachian, I think it's 14 different states, with West Virginia being the only state that is fully Appalachian. Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Right?
So it's mostly sorghum cane.
Mostly sorghum, yes.
Mostly sorghum cane. In the Caribbean, it's sugar cane. And the difference between sorghum and sugar, they're both grasses, but the difference is the percentage of sucrose, it's sugar content. And so when we're talking about this dish, the basis of this dish starts with sugar, something called burnt sugar essence, which is browning, and we're gonna get to that. So first thing we're going to do for the pilau is that we're going to season our beef. And so here we just have our beef. And we are using a bevy of different aromatics. So we're gonna start with some salt and pepper, some thyme, garlic, minced garlic, fresh ginger, lots of ginger, fruity fire from Scotch bonnets, Worcestershire, and ketchup. And then, last but not least, grassy sweetness from some chives. And we're gonna stir this together, and this marinade is going to form the base, the flavor base for the pilau. And this is usually marinated for at least 12 hours, but you would probably, the longer the better, like all marinades are. Wouldn't you agree, Chef?
I would,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yes.
Longer the better.
Right?
Couple days.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, boom, longer the better.
Wow.
Here we have it.
It's the magic of television.
Right?
It's wonderful.
I know. It's magic of...
I need to cook with you more often. You just make things happen.
No, it's the magic of Rebecca, right? And so next we're going to start with the base of this ingredient, which is browning, which is burnt sugar essence. And browning here is, we're using brown sugar. And how, again, it connects to Appalachian Foodways is through molasses. So like in Appalachia, they would probably say molassie, a kind of pluralized form.
Because we use a lot of it.
Yes, yes, exactly. And so what happens is that you take your brown sugar and you're just gonna put it in there, right? Some oil. And then you're going to see what happens here. So you're going to stir this around. And this is going to turn into a deep brown, essence. And it will look something like molasses. And what you want to remember here is like in Caribbean cooking, so much of our cooking rides itself on sugar. And because of the transatlantic slave trade from the 16th to the 18th century, also because of sugarcane harvesting and all its many derivatives, and molasses is one. And so this is not molasses, but when we're talking about Appalachian cuisine, we see how this process kind of mimics that, because when you're using sorghum cane for molasses, it's like the first boil and the second press. And then the second press is like a molasses, but then the third press, which is a more deeper, more bitter, and that's where you get black strap.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, absolutely.
And so this process mimics that, and you really see why imparting flavors with that deep, smoky, rich, dark hue is essential part of Caribbean cooking that overlaps with Appalachian Foodways. So
well, and it really is what is available. I think that is Appalachian in general. Is you used what you had out of necessity. The founders, the settlers, it was hunters and gatherers. So you used what was grown, what was at your fingertips, what you had now in our backyards.
Exactly.
So I remember growing up in a, large Italian family with my grandfather, in Appalachia, we always had corn, we always had tomatoes, we always had peppers. Italian families usually hot peppers. And so a lot of what we did was from that. And I think, we talk about authenticity. It's the profiles, it's the flavor profiles, it's what we have to use. Yesterday we did a demo, Brandon and I did venison. So obviously in West Virginia, venison is it's the protein that was readily available.
Yes.
It was all over the place, squirrel, things like that. So what do? We still in Appalachia shut down for 2 weeks right at the beginning of deer season. And that way the rural areas especially, but pretty much the whole state shuts down. We processed last year, the hunters processed about 120,000 pounds of venison. So it's still the same, but it's all about authenticity. It's all about what you have to utilize. So nowadays, I think as chefs, and that is smelling awesome.
So this is just the sugar and the oil, and this is exactly what you want. This is the base for pilau. This is the base for something called black cake, which you would think, how could it be possible? But in Caribbean cooking, so much of our stews start with this base. So when it gets to this point, now we're going to add our meat, and it's gonna splash, but don't be scared. And that's where you have it.
But that's what you want to hear.
That's what you want to hear.
In my house, if I'm, when I'm cooking, if I'm not setting off the smoke alarm, I'm not cooking. Right?
Exactly. And so you now see this color. And this smoky sweetness, it is going to carry out throughout the dish. Like getting your browning to the point where it is dark, dark, dark brown, but never black, where it goes from small amber granules to large viscous orbs. And then you place your seasoned meat in that. This is the basis for pilau. This is the basis for brown stew chicken. And again, it starts with sugar.
Yeah. Everything starts with sugar.
Everything starts with sugar.
Everything. Yes. So while you're doing that, so I'm marinating some oysters, which makes total sense for West Virginia being a landlocked Appalachian state, right? So why am I doing oysters? So we talk about the history of Appalachia. We talk about accessibility. Back in the early 1900s, the B&O Railroad allowed us to source oysters. So when I think of Appalachia, just like Trinidad, it's about community, it's about family,
Yes.
it's about coming together over a meal. And that's what we did in Appalachia when the rail cars would show up once a month, mostly months that ended in R, we were able to get the oysters, and the whole town showed up. So it was, everything came off because, the rail cars had ice on them. And so literally the entire town would come together, and we weren't eating the oysters raw like we do now,
Right.
because we didn't trust them. But
Exactly.
there was also not a lot of refrigeration. And if you got sick back then, you may as well just pat me on the head and just write me off, right?
Exactly, right.
So what we did, back in the day, oyster stews, fried oysters, baked, barbecued, those kinds of things. Everybody came together as a community and did everything together. So a lot of these authenticity, I think, in our restaurants and in my cooking just means community. It means bringing people together over a meal. Let's sit down. Usually in West Virginia, it's probably over a little moonshine. Let's
And
talk
Trinidad, a
about,
little rum.
There you go,
Right?
Exactly. And every culture has that, right?
That's true.
And it's come into my home, come into my place. Let's sit down and talk about it. So I am doing a Nashville hot oyster that we do in our restaurant. So also when you talk about Appalachia and just, cooking in general, we talk about being sustainable. We can talk about cooking with what we have and not wasting anything. And so I'm marinating the oysters in buttermilk and hot sauce. So with this hot sauce, we talk about things like fermentation. Now it's cool. Back then it was a necessity. You pickled, you brined, you cured, and then you put everything in the basement and just left it because there's small growing seasons for corn and tomatoes and all these things. So we had to make sure that we had them all year round.
Exactly. And it's funny, interesting that you say that, because even now talking about modern Appalachian cuisine and what you mentioned, fermentation, you see how these modern techniques, they still bend to the light of this ancestral wisdom.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely. Yes. And so I fermented Fresno chilies that we grew on the farm, tomatoes, a little bit of garlic and carrots, did a lacto ferment, so a 2% salt solution, covered it and just set it aside for 2 weeks. Then we took the mash and strained it. There is a local distillery that we buy whiskey from, and I took the mash. First, we strained it out, and then we put the strained liquid in the bourbon barrel for 2 months. So this was the first mash. So I dehydrated this. We use this in our oyster breading. So again, necessity, what we have. I don't want to throw anything away. We didn't throw anything away. That was not what we did. Then after 2 months in the barrel, the same mash strained out again, looks like this. So it's got the char from the barrel. It adds a whole different flavor profile. So we use this as a garnish. It just looks cool. Some of those things that we do as chefs are like, I just threw it in there because it looks cool, right?
Now, back then
you had to do it. It wasn't about looking cool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No.
So I'm gonna add our, and so these, so we have a pimento cheese dish, which is also traditional Appalachian and Southern. So we do with spiced saltine crackers. And then all the saltine crackers that we break, again, sustainability, necessity, we grind those up. We add a little bit of flour, add a little bit of panko breadcrumbs. So we're not wasting anything at all in the kitchen. Then we're adding seasonings. So we've got our garlic powder, our onion powder, a little bit of smoked paprika, salt and pepper. Make sure, and taste your oysters first. Make sure that, depending on how briny they are, you may add a little bit less salt. When you think about a dish in general, as chefs, we think about flavors, we think about sweetness, we think about textures. But we also need to think about all of these things coming together as a component of a dish. So we try not to season everything perfectly, because the dish would be probably over seasoned.
Exactly.
And then third or fourth bite, your palate might get a little tired.
Exactly.
That looks and smells awesome.
Right.
Chef.
And listen, this has sprung its own juices. And that's kind of the magic of this dish. So now we're gonna add in our coconut milk to here, followed by our pigeon peas. And when we're talking about pelau, it is important to remember that this dish is the kind of dish that life doesn't make anymore. Because out of all of Trinidadian cultural groups, from East Indians to indigenous peoples to the European colonizers, everything is represented in this dish. So we have oils from Europe, the rice from East Indian settlers, the pigeon peas I just added from Africa, and all of it kind of comes together seamlessly in this one pot. And this is our unofficial national dish. And the reason why, it's because it gives veiled visibility to all of those different composite parts of the island. So in this one pot, no matter where you are demographically, you could see a part of yourself reflected in each of one of these elements.
That is awesome. And that is very similar to Appalachia. You know, you think about why our ancestors, or why my family came to West Virginia, and why a lot of immigrants migrated to West Virginia was because of the mines.
Yes.
So West Virginia had a boom, and it was African American, it was Italian American, it was Scotch Irish, and they came over to work because no one else wanted to do the work. It's hard work.
Right.
But a lot of these things were out of their heritage and brought over.
Yeah.
So we celebrate it all the time in our restaurants.
And also the prevalence and the input of Native Americans in Appalachian.
Southern.
Exactly.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I think it was 4 dominant tribes.
Yeah.
The Cherokees, Swear-Twenty,
Yep, and the Kanawha.
Yes.
And like, that is where I think the hunter-gatherer mentality
Exactly.
comes from. They were living off the land. It was what they had to deal with there.
Yes.
And that was absolutely, it's all out of necessity. And then they taught us how to use those products.
It's true, because, and also like you mentioned the moonshine, but it's also how do you take native herbs and elements and really transmute them so that they not only embody some of those spiritual characteristics, but also use as remedies.
Absolutely.
And medicinals.
Absolutely. And what doesn't make you feel better than alcohol?
I mean,
right? I mean, it kind of cures everything. Right?
It's true.
All right. So we do a Nashville hot. So I'm going to go ahead and mix up now. We're gonna fry the oysters in a second. I'm gonna mix our Nashville hot sauce. So obviously Nashville hot sauce, everybody knows. Nashville hot chicken. So again, we just kind of, as chefs, we like to take classic things and blow them up and put them together our way. You know, we're not reinventing the wheel, we're just adding our own spoke to the wheel. And so we do our Nashville hot oyster. It is served on a bread, just a brioche crostini. We do pickles, so I'm gonna make a quick pickle while we're doing this. And so Nashville hot sauce is basically a rub, pretty much a barbecue rub, a little bit hotter, and then you take the oil that you were frying chicken in, or in this case, oysters, and add it to it, so it's like this hot
It's a good
cauldron.
crossover.
Yeah, it's wonderful, and then put them in there. So I'm gonna, while we're talking about that, I'm just gonna pickle, ferment, those things nowadays, are cool, but again, we had to do those back in the day before refrigeration, and also for seasonality purposes. So I'm doing a bread and butter pickle, so it's a little bit more sugar than salt, make it a little sweeter, white vinegar, pickling spice. I'm not making a sachet with the pickling spice, so what we do is we'll just straight it through a chinois right over, and we do a quick pickle. So magic of television.
Yes. The magic
Pickle.
of Rebecca.
Look how great
mean,
you
you
did.
just turned
I
it
mean,
there.
you know,
I
it's
know.
just amazing how things happen when I'm standing next to you. Pickles turn from vinegar.
Pickles are just-
Yes, I don't even know where the cucumber came from.
And so you said you're doing a brioche.
Yes.
Like, why? And it's funny because like when I was preparing for this and I thought I'm researching a lot of Appalachian food history, some of the materials I came across was that white bread was it was foundational, but it was also almost a treat because corn
Absolutely.
was the
Right.
most like prevalent produce.
Right. So you would probably do something like a Johnny cake or a griddle
Yes,
cake or something like
yes.
that, right? Well, you know, because I like butter,
Yes.
obviously, I have butter here for no reason. Like it just feels natural. You know, I'm not a culinary genius. I just add butter or wrap something
do you
in
keep butter
bacon.
by your bedside?
I do. Carrie thinks it's weird, but you know, I think it's just
The bedside butter?
Like, yes, the bedside butter. Yeah, I don't have a glass of water. I just wake up and just pop a cube of butter. You know, it seems to be working, Chef.
I mean, I think so. I think you're on to the next
I
trend.
think it is.
I think that's the next
it.
trend. You heard it here,
That's
folks.
the next thing that is going to happen. So I'm gonna take these here. I'm gonna drop these oysters right in our fry basket. I'm gonna drop them in, leave the fry basket down so that way they don't stick to the bottom. And really a couple seconds. So you're just developing, and while I do this, I'm going to take a little bit of this. I'm going to mix this together. That should be enough. Okay. So here is our Nashville hot. So just be careful. You don't have to add the hot liquid to it. You can do it just with oil, regular oil. This is probably probably need just a smidge more.
And so this process of adding oil to the seasonings,
Yes.
like how is this like hark back to some of those formative foodway traditions?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we do is, again, we were frying things. We had a seasoning, and we're like, oh, I think maybe this is what we should do is, you know, keep it hot.
Yes.
And then again, it's what we had.
And not waste the oil.
Not waste the oil, right? Because
Exactly.
oil is, as we know, since COVID, oil is not cheap anymore.
Is anything cheap anymore?
No, everything is not cheap. So, again, not overcooking the oyster. This is, you know, I talked to a chef who's probably one of my great friends, and he's in Lost Creek, and in Lost Creek, West Virginia. Mike Costello is probably the farm-to-table chef in West Virginia. If you
Right.
ask me, you know, I'm not a farm-to-table chef. Like, I'll go out and forage for some mushrooms. You know, I will go out and pick some ramps. But he lives on the farm.
Wow.
They have people come to the farm and do this. If you ask me kind of what I do and what I am, I kind of say community chef.
Right.
You know, I bring people together through food, and I don't think that there is another thing in the world that brings people together
No.
like food. And I think that's where all cultures, wars stop over meals. And, you know,
Agreed.
it's either meals or soccer, one of the two.
Listen, right? I agree with you. But it's interesting that you say community chef because like that is the whole bedrock of our industry.
Absolutely.
Like you cannot
Absolutely.
like it's not something that is insular. Like
No.
you can't divorce what we're doing
Absolutely.
with
I mean,
the people around us.
I'm passionate about ingredients. I'm passionate about food. We
And
consider
butter.
ourselves, and butter.
Yes.
I'm passionate about butter. And that's it. That's pretty much it. No, but what I'm really enjoy is creating the experience, creating something, bringing people together. Thank you. So in the restaurant, so we use the bread and butter pickle. And that gives a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of tartness. You know, we've got the crunch from the crostini. I did drown those crostinis, as you see, in butter. Because
As expected, yes.
I'm a foregone conclusion, really. I mean, you just, it's butter. And then the piece de resistance is ranch. So in West Virginia, ranch is basically a food group. So there's,
Understandably.
yeah, it's a whole new thing. It is. And if I don't have ranch on the menu, I don't know if people would even come.
No, I don't
So,
think so. I
I
don't
don't
think
know.
they would, no.
So I'm gonna go ahead and mix this up. I'm gonna drop our oysters right on there as we're hanging out. So we've got the heat, we've got the sweet from the pickle, we've got the crunch from the pickle. We put these right on, and then I'm just gonna drizzle a little bit of the ranch on top. So in my mind, this is kind of that perfect dish. It's got the heat, it's got the sweet, it's got the crunch, it's got something that isn't normally, we wouldn't think of traditional Appalachia, but if we really dig into the history.
All the components are there. All the elements are there.
Absolutely. And two, it's okay to drip a little bit on the plate.
Absolutely.
I think it
That looks
adds.
fantastic.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. I might just throw a pat of butter on it at one time. I'm not sure yet. My chef de cuisine might be upset with me. No. And then again, we'll just drizzle a little bit of ranch dressing over it. And we'll put it in a squeeze bottle and make it look super fancy.
But this is how we did it. This is how it was done before.
Absolutely.
There was no squeeze bottle.
No squeeze bottles. We are tweezers.
Yes,
It's amazing.
I know.
Like I've got a bunch of tweezers. They're called fingers. And it was
It's
funny.
true.
Brandon's roommate, Jeff, and I still keep in really good touch. And every time we were going to different events together, we would look at each other, tweezers.
Tweezers.
And like,
You have them
I don't know
built
if I can
in.
do that. Now everything is tweezers, so
Yes.
I've kind of graduated to it.
It's
But-
true.
So this is our kind of signature appetizer in the restaurant. So this is our Appalachian Nashville hot oyster. So it really grasps the history, I think, of West Virginia, but also it's kind of our twist on it. And that's really what we're doing as chefs, right? We're just
Exactly.
adding our little spoke to history and trying to change it. I was lucky enough, as Brandon said, to be nominated and be the first West Virginian to make the James Beard finalists last year. And it was the best part about it, as Carrie and I were sitting in Chicago and Terry Covell won, for like 2 seconds, I was disappointed. And then I got a message on my phone from the local farmers market that I do fundraising for, and there was 500 people there watching it, arm in arm, singing
Yes.
Country Roads. And that was what the difference was for me. It wasn't about the win, because in my mind, we won.
It is
We
a
were
win.
in the conversation.
I'm sorry. Your finalist
Yeah.
was a win,
It was,
right?
thank you.
Exactly.
But it was about, West Virginia has, I joked that Brandon was going to be my translator for West Virginia. Because, Appalachian, and we do a lot of, we put an extra syllable on some things, and we take 3 syllables and make them 1. But in that moment and since, I think I have been able to be a conduit to instill some pride in West Virginia. I mean, we literally, as we were walking around Chicago, we had 1,000 messages of, hey, we got your back, we loved it. And
Yes.
so that, to me, is what Appalachia and cuisine and being a chef is about.
And it's like taking the authenticity and parlaying it into an experience
Absolutely.
that still reflects your history, but it still is not. It's approachable but not predictable.
Absolutely.
Like you could really see a full span of creativity, but also the history, and not many people could.
And
do
as
that.
long as
So,
we
yeah.
keep it authentic.
Exactly.
And if we do it from our heart, it is authentic.
Yes.
And I think that's what it's about, is about
true.
being true to your roots.
Yes.
Being true to the sugar.
True to the sugar
True
and
to
to the
the
butter.
sugar and the butter.
That's it. That's always what it is all about. So here, this is simmering, and now this is what it will, this is the finished product right here. And so
They need smell-o-vision.
I know. That's what I said in the last session. I was like, this needs to come and scratch and sniff.
It does.
You know?
Absolutely.
But what happens here is that part of the bottom of this, if it continues to cook down, there will be a thin layer, almost like
Like a socarat.
yes, exactly.
Yes,
And in
yes.
Trinidad, we call that the bun,
Oh,
right? And that is some people, I never liked it growing up, but
oh, that's the
and
crunchy bits.
yes, the crunchy bits.
Yeah.
And for me, like, I remember when I wrote about this dish at some length on Bon Appetit, and I remember when I was writing this essay, and I said I need to devote some time to bun because what happens is that people might be tempted to avoid the bun or being like, no, that's like the black, like we don't want that, it's burnt. But then it points to like a bigger social metaphor that even these lowliest and burnt black bits that we might be tempted to discard, for others,
Yeah.
it's a point of like delight and
best.
joy.
Yeah.
And so that's like really what we're
Yeah.
seeing here.
It's like the heel.
Exactly.
bread or-
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And every culture has that.
Absolutely.
What is it? What will that be? A bun equivalent, if it had to be translated into West Virginian parlance for something like.
So, in West Virginia, I think the one ingredient that we have and that is the most authentic is ramps.
Really?
So, it's a wild garlic onion and, we saute them with
Yes.
again, it's the potatoes and
Yes.
the ramps and the little burnt bits that stick
Yeah.
there, same thing. And that's what I
Exactly.
want. I'll
It's
serve the
true.
rest of the stuff and then I'll, pour a little bit in it. It's that potato fond.
Yes.
Yeah.
The potato fond. I love that. So now we're gonna make like a tricolor for slaw, and this is pelau is traditionally served with a slaw. So we're gonna start with some brown sugar, some salt, some black pepper, Dijon mustard.
Of course, it's my mustard, right?
Yes.
Of course it is.
Some apple cider-
And also Hellman's mayonnaise.
Hellman's
You
mayonnaise.
don't
Thank you.
use any other.
We do not use any other, and thank you, Unilever.
Yes,
Right?
Absolutely.
And then
You
we're
gotta
going
give a
to-
nod where it's deserved.
Right? We're gonna kind of whisk this together.
Best foods out there.
Best foods, you're right, same, you're right, yes.
Right?
Because it's the best.
And so you have in here the sweet, the fat, the salty, and then we're gonna put this in here. And then we're gonna toss this to combine. And this in here we have cabbage, 2 types of cabbage, green and red. And as my 7-year-old, she says, "Mommy, that's not red cabbage, it's clearly purple."
Yeah, if nothing else, they are 100% honest.
Right? And it's
Yes.
true. And I was just like, I said, it
Yeah.
is, but
And if you want some true feedback of your food,
oh my goodness.
give it to them. They're like,
Right?
nope, sorry. Not doing it for me.
No, it's exactly. And so we're gonna mix this together, just so it's all coated in that dressing that has that snap of vinegar is essential because it leans into the crunch, but also gives it that nice.
Kind of breaks it down,
Yeah.
gives you a little.
Not like bite on the side of your tongue. Yeah.
It cleans everything out,
Exactly.
especially because the dish is rich as well, right?
It is very. And so now we're going to plate this, and so, we get our. Oh, thank you. So here we have our pelau. Oh, sorry.
That
this is
smells
a-
absolutely
Right?
delicious, chef. And I think this is,
Some slaw.
the one pot that is very Appalachian, that is very
Really?
traditional, that is authentic, is, in some, we talk about squirrel, this would kind of be a burgoo of sorts in Appalachia.
I didn't think about
Yeah.
that. Yes, absolutely. And then so we have avocados, which Most one-pot dishes in the Caribbean, this could be a stewed chicken, this could be a different type of pilau, like a chicken pilau. It is not complete without avocado.
Oh, yeah.
I've always had an avocado tree growing up in my yard. It is just that,
Yeah.
it's like how you would add lettuce and tomato to a sandwich.
Yep.
And so that is essential. And then some chopped
That
cilantro.
looks beautiful.
And there you have it. Trinidadian
wonderful.
beef pilau.
That's great.
Thank you.
Helps if I turn the microphone on to start talking, right, at the end of the day. First off, I thought you said you were going to put some ranch on there. Like, I don't
Oh,
even know
do
that
we
you
need
actually
more ranch?
put ranch on there.
Well, I was saving, because I gotta have some.
True. But amazing demo chefs. The food looks absolutely amazing. Let's open up the floor to some questions. I'm sure that there has to be some floating around out there. Or maybe not. That's just how good they are, right?
Oh, there's a question there.
All right. Yeah, working. The next one needs to be over
For the
here.
live feed, we have to have it on the microphone.
Exercise it. Hello, I'm Terry Braggs, and I really enjoyed this dish that was simmering. I'm sorry, I don't remember what you called it.
Pilau.
Pilau.
Pilau. P-A-L-A-U. Yes. And that's like a term that has been hybridized. So it's anglicized version of pilaf or P-O-L-O-W, pulau, which is known as in India. So like when it came across to Trinidad and to the east, it all of these reworkings kind of got, a little bit bastardized, hybridized into this new dish.
And
That's
adapted
what it is.
to what you had.
Exactly.
Right? Yes,
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yes. So sorry. Yes. Pilau. A little bit of history.
Got it. Thank you so much. In the beginning, you sauteed the brown sugar with the oil. Could you just kind of elaborate a little bit more on that? In general, I would imagine you would have seared the meat first, but you started with the sugar first. And I thought that was very interesting, especially when you let it get really dark and it started to smoke, and you were like, that's perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it smells amazing. I really want to bite, but I just wanted you to explain that a little bit more about that process of browning the brown sugar like that.
So again, browning is part of Caribbean culture. It is a leftover remnant from slavery, from the triangle slave trade. It is it's the way that it's like almost the smoke behind a braise, essentially. So to get it to impart color, to impart sweetness, like a tinge of smoky sweetness, to get the meat to the point that it is very succulent, but also to really allow the meat and its juices, because we saw how it sprang its own juices to cohere in that smoky brown sugar pot. And so you could find browning sold. It's on Amazon. You could get it in a bottle, right? You could.
I always wondered what that was.
Yes, exactly. And
I could do brownie.
Yes. And so, but why would you do it when it's easy enough that you could make it?
Right.
And so you can't. It is, like I said, it's an indispensable ingredient, and it's also the base of black cake, which is this months-long process of making a Christmas cake, which that's for a whole other worlds of flavors.
We'll start on it now. It'll be ready next year.
It'll be ready for next one.
You heard it here.
Right?
It'll be ready next year.
And so I think having that visual representation, that visual cue of browning, and not searing the meat first, because usually like you said, dry pan, you sear your meat, and then you will take it out, deglaze, then add the ingredients, but
layering those flavors, building the flavors up.
Exactly. But this part it's almost inverted. And that's kind of the reason why.
I'm going to adapt that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do not buy the browning on Amazon.
I'm not buying the browning.
Yeah, chefs, great job. I'm just going to piggyback off that a little bit. I've noticed that sugar browning technique in some Vietnamese and Thai cuisine as well. Is there some sort of historical connection there, or is it just other cultures where sugar's a huge component in the cooking where they do that as well? Is that something you've noticed in your journeys?
Yes, like sugar browning is there are variations of sugar browning throughout the different culinary traditions. And I think it comes down to what the goal is. And I like in Caribbean culture, like I said, the goal is to get the meat to have a smoky sweet component, to have this anchoring color, because it does have to be like dark and rich. And I think like what you asked in terms of you're noticing these other ribbons that are connecting these other like cultures, that kind of goes back to why we are even talking about the link between West Virginian
Yes,
West Virginian
absolutely.
oysters
and
and
there's brown
Trinidad.
sugar in the hot sauce too. Yesterday, Unilever did the Toronites where they actually had a rondeau of of fry oil and put the sugar directly in the oil and then dropped the Torone in it. So the sugar adhered to the outside of basically the lumpia, and then it created this caramelized, delicious best bite. And I'm sure we were talking about like, did someone do that? Or was it just like, oh, I spilled some sugar in there and now look what happened?
Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, I think sugar is like salt too. It helps to awaken our palate.
Thank you. I have a question about the pea or the bean, the pulse that you used. And are you concerned about the biodiversity of some of your key ingredients and the lack thereof them?
So we used gongo peas or pigeon peas, green pigeon peas. And I remember one time I was home recently and I was asking, it was when this assignment was due, and I was like, Mommy, okay, come on, let's make it. Let's go. And she's like, Brigid, when I was making this as a little girl, we did not buy canned peas. She's like, none of that nonsense you use. She's like, it was like an hours-long process of like taking the pigeon peas, pulling off the vein, opening up, shelling it, like getting, and I said, wait, this would take, I mean, we saw how long, this would take, but.
Sounds really fun.
Yeah, exactly, no, right? And then she's like, this was the process, and she's like, but it also, the dish was deserving of that attention.
Yeah.
And so, to your question about if I could use other peas, I think this is what has always, pigeon peas grows vast and abundant in the Caribbean. It's a West African varietal as well, and I think this is what has always been used. Yeah.
Yeah, beans are a huge part of Appalachian cuisine as well. We'll do leather britches. So we'll take the beans and instead of, going through all the work, we string them up and hang them basically over the hot line.
Really?
And it preserves them, it dries them out, and then you reheat them.
Wait, you said leather britches?
Leather britches, that's what they call it. That's what they're called, because they look like leather britches. Yeah, leather pants.
I didn't know that.
So they dry out and they
Yes.
get wrinkly, and then it's another preservation method. So obviously you got a ton of beans, what do you do with them?
Right.
So you string them up, we put them over the hot line during the time where we're like, okay, we're done with beans.
What do you use it for? How do you use it?
Then we reconstitute it with either chicken stock or vegetable stock, of course, a little butter, or bacon, and then we serve it, and it's leather britches. Yeah, it's cool.
That's interesting.
You had mentioned that this dish came from India originally, got renamed, and is now authentic to your region.
Well, it's a variation of it.
So do you foresee in like future generations, maybe not this dish, but another dish that moved from any other place, gets a little changed a little bit, renamed being authentic? And at what point do you think we have to go back in time to call something authentic?
That's a good question. I think that so slavery was abolished in 1830s. And in Trinidad, the arrival of the first East Indian descendants came like in the 60s because there still needed a strong labor force for all of the sugarcane plantations. And I think it was, and then also Chinese arrived as well. And in Trinidad, there's still monuments to like the vessel Fortitude, where the Chinese migrants arrived, and the Fatal Razak, which was like the Indian ship. And so I think with all of those seminal, pivotal movements that made Trinidad, that's how this happened. And I think because that history has just long been established and affirmed into something like this, I personally don't foresee it having other variations, because this is kind of how we know it. You know, like this is like the end result of all of that movement, of all of that migration, of like the ending of slavery and indentured servitude and the Chinese immigrants. Like, and this kind of represents the end of, and also the beginning, because like I said,
same with West Virginia. We broke off from Virginia,
Yes.
and then a lot of the African Americans migrated to West Virginia because it was freedom, a place to work, a place to settle, a place to feel comfortable. And again, I'm sure there is a dish that is very similar in West Virginia. It's just used different, it's probably more beans that were, indigenous to Appalachia, probably squirrel instead of, or maybe pork or whatever was there. Yeah.
And it's because it's like, this is a protein-rich rice dish. Every single culture has a protein-rich rice dish. From biryani,
Yes.
right? I mean, it's like
in South
to
Africa,
like paella.
Yeah.
Like this
Absolutely.
is not one. This is one thing, but it's many things.
Sure.
And like what you're talking about, it's like it's one dish, but it's a monolith, yes, because it's pelau. But in it, you see the whole spectrum of.
And you were able to feed the whole family or the
Exactly.
whole town with small
Exactly.
amount of protein
Yes.
and a large amount of whatever
Yes,
else was
of starch
there.
and veg.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Does that answer your question? Okay.
I was going to say, and I think authentic is kind of open to interpretation to some extent too, right? Because you can go into one area and like ranch dressing to me may not be ranch dressing to you, may not be ranch dressing to the guy down the street, but mine's authentic. And it's like, well, actually, no, mine's authentic. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's open to interpretation on what you're used to consuming and the region that you're from. It could vary street to street, block to block, city to city. So I think authenticity is kind of what you make it at the end of the day.
Kind of continuing on that, as we think about what do you see as the future of Appalachian cuisine? So you talked a little bit about the heritage and how you had different groups coming in to work the mines, and the heritage, the food they brought with them, adapting it to what was available. It was all about what you could find. As we see, the population there evolving, what do you see as the future of Appalachian cuisine?
Well, I think it's, more, I think a lot of times to go forward, we, like you said, we go back. So we touch the heritage. We make sure that we are keeping it real. And then we add our own spokes to it. I think modernizing it, things like this, taking traditional Appalachian things or things that maybe, I think we as chefs, we need to research and see what was authentic or what was going on or what cultures were settling and what was teaching. And I really think that I feel that it's more comfort. I think especially coming out of what we just experienced and what all of us in this room experienced over the last couple of years and how we all had to pivot. I think right now for me, Appalachian culture and going forward is some sense of nostalgia and some sense of normalcy and some sense of comfort. And for good, bad, or otherwise, we spent a lot of time with our families over the last couple of years, and we ate a lot of food that our families cooked. And some of us were lucky enough to have great chefs cooking for us, and some of us weren't. But I think that Appalachian cuisine moving forward is taking the comfort and then elevating it to whatever level you want to. You know, we have a fine dining Appalachian restaurant, but it doesn't have a white tablecloth. You know, I want you to come in shorts and you know, definitely shirt and pants, but you know, flip-flops. And I want you to come in and feel comfortable, even though the dish you may recognize as something that your grandmother talked about, but it didn't look like that. Like, this is not your mom's stew. We do right now, we have a beef stroganoff dish, and it is a beet agnolotti with an herb cream sauce and a braised short rib with Hernshaw Farms mushrooms, demi-glaze. So it is the things that you remember, but then presented in a different way, so it opens your eyes. So like that taste,
Yes.
it tastes like stroganoff,
Exactly.
but this does not look like
But
stroganoff.
there's an element of surprise.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
And I really like what you said there, Chef, about like, it is that element of care, that element of there is some nostalgia here, and that is a good thing.
Yes,
And that should be blessed as like,
absolutely.
this is another way in which food could be both nourish and nurture.
Yeah.
And like taking that and really allowing it to shine on a different
Absolutely.
plate.
And you're taking your heart and putting it, and your art and putting it on the plate, and showing your guests that you care enough about them and thank them for coming in and sharing that experience with you. That's what we talk about that a lot, is seeing the dining experience not through our eyes, because we
Right.
get jaded and we're on the line and we're pumping out food and we're doing 120 covers. But if we sit back and think about what it's like to sit at the table and how you feel and how we can make a difference in your day, whether you've had a great day or a terrible day, you know, we want to add to the greatness or make the bad day better, right?
Absolutely.
Well, we're in the profession of making memories, right?
Absolutely.
It's true.
Whenever somebody leaves the restaurant, there's nothing tangibly for them to take home aside from what they remember. So we either give them a great memory or we give them a bad one.
Yeah.
And the hope is that we always give them great memories, right? So, any other questions? All right. Well, again, chefs, thank you so very much. We're going to end 5 minutes early.
Chef,
So great.
thank you.
It's so great.
I know.
Fantastic.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely amazing.
Thank you, Rebecca.
I'm going to hand this over to